Welcome to the deep dive. You sent us your sources, and, well, we're here to get straight to the heart of it.
Yep, pulling out those key insights, maybe some surprising facts too. A shortcut to understanding, really.
Exactly. And today, this one's for you. We're diving into a text you provided, Van Bun Dik Dan, specifically the part called Nung Yu Lamvo Phut.
Which translates pretty directly to misunderstandings about Buddhism.
Right. So our mission today is basically to unpack some of those common mix-ups about Buddhist ideas based on this text anyway, help you get a clearer picture.
And it's worth mentioning right up front. This text comes from the perspective of a Theravāda Buddhist monk.
Okay, that's important context.
Yeah, Theravāda is one of the oldest schools, so it's a specific viewpoint. Buddhism is, incredibly diverse. This isn't the only take on things.
Got it. So keeping that lens in mind, let's jump into the first big one. The text actually questions if Buddhism is a religion, like in the usual sense. That might sound a bit strange to some folks. What's the argument there?
Well, the core distinction the author makes is about a creator God.
Ah,
Right? So, yeah, there are rituals, practices, things that look religious from the outside, but the argument is because there's no central belief in a supreme being who's like rewarding and punishing people.
calling the shots from above.
Exactly. It doesn't quite fit that traditional Western definition of religion. It's presented as a different kind of framework.
Okay, interesting. So not about worshiping a divine judge, basically.
Pretty much.
Then the next point the text tackles is Buddhism just about, praying for stuff, getting what you want, like a cosmic vending machine?
Well, no. The text is careful there. It acknowledges faith as part of Buddhism.
Okay.
But it distinguishes that from just making everyday requests, praying for a parking spot
Or a lottery win.
Right. It's not primarily about asking for worldly favors. The emphasis is more on inner development, understanding reality, not trying to purely manipulate external forces for personal gain.
That makes sense. The focus shifts inwards. Okay, so then the text talks about Buddhism and philosophy. It mentions the Tipitaka,
Which is the main collection of scriptures, yeah, the Pali Canon.
and it's described as Nuthuk, Nuthithut. You said that's roughly as it is, as it was said.
That's a decent translation, yeah.
So how does that differ from, say, Western philosophy, according to this source?
The main difference highlighted is the approach. Western philosophy often involves a lot of analysis, speculation, building arguments, debating them.
Deconstruction.
Right.
Yeah.
The text implies that Buddhist teachings, this as it is presented more like direct accounts of reality, things derived from insight, from experience, not just abstract theories to be kicked around intellectually in the same way.
So less about logically proving an idea and more about presenting a reality that's been, directly seen or realized.
That's the gist of it, yes,
Yeah.
from this perspective.
Which kind of leads into the next point, doesn't it, about intellectual reasoning itself. The source seems a bit wary of relying too heavily on just thinking about things. Try a loon.
Exactly. It really stresses direct insight into reality, kaipuk, the text calls it. That's valued over purely intellectual analysis. In fact, it even suggests that getting bogged down in thinlun, like long discussions about meditation, might actually mean you're not really doing the meditation. You're not experiencing it. The real understanding from this viewpoint comes through practice, through direct seeing, not just concepts.
That's a really sharp point. Stop theorizing, start experiencing. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Charity, generosity. The text says, yeah, that's there, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
Right. It's an important distinction the author wants to make. Social charity, helping others materially, that's definitely valued.
Of course.
But the text argues that contributions in other areas are, in a way, considered higher. Things like education, culture, art, and especially the meditation practices themselves, samatha vipassana.
Why is that, though?
The reasoning seems to be that social charity is kind of universal. Many traditions practice it. But the unique contribution of Buddhism, according to this text, lies more in the wisdom, the educational aspects, the cultural expressions, and crucially, the path of mental cultivation through meditation.
So it's like, without that inner work, the outer work might be good, but it's not the full picture of the Buddhist path.
But that seems to be the implication, yes. A more holistic contribution.
Okay, next up, nirvana. Often pictured as, ultimate bliss, maybe floating on a cloud somewhere. A paradise.
Yeah, the text pushes back on that quite strongly. It says, while yes, joy and happiness are definitely part of the path, part of liberation,
Sure.
The idea of nirvana as some kind of external perfect place you go to is misleading.
So it's not a destination.
Not in that sense. The text quotes the sixth patriarch, Hunang.
Ah, yes, you mentioned that.
Buddha-dharma is in the world. Without the world, there is no awakening. To seek Bodhi apart from the world is like searching for a rabbit's horn.
Wow. Okay, so it's something realized right here, right now.
Exactly. It's about understanding and ending suffering within this very existence, not escaping it.
That really grounds the whole concept. Okay, moving on. The famous 84,000 Dharma gates. Sounds like a lot of doors.
Huh. Yeah, the text clarifies this. It says the term is actually more accurately 8 Fop Una, or Dhammakanda.
Okay, and that means...
Aggregates or collections of dharma, not gates or doors, Dhammadvara. Un means groups, like the collections of teachings related to morality, concentration, wisdom.
Ah, okay, so groupings of teachings.
Right, and the number, 84,000, that's understood as symbolic in ancient India. It just means a vast, immense, uncountable number.
Like we might say tons or loads.
Precisely. It's not a literal count of 84,000 separate techniques. It just emphasizes how rich and comprehensive the teachings are.
That makes much more sense than trying to imagine 84,000 distinct paths. Okay, what about things like fortune-telling, astrology, picking auspicious days? Are those Buddhist practices?
According to this text, a clear no. It explicitly states these aren't part of Buddhist principles. There's even a Pali verse mentioned that basically says your actions in the present moment are what determine good fortune, not stars or calendars.
So it brings it back to personal responsibility again, your conduct now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not relying on external predictions or rituals for luck.
Okay. Next, the idea of fate. Unment. Does Buddhism teach predestination?
No. The source contrasts Buddhism with that. It teaches karma, action, and consequence.
Right. We hear that word a lot.
But it's not fate in the sense of everything being predetermined and unchangeable, unlike maybe some interpretations of Confucianism or the old Brahmanical caste system mentioned in the text. Buddhism emphasizes that your intentional actions create your future experiences. Good actions lead towards happiness, unwholesome actions towards suffering. You have agency.
That's a really key difference. Choice matters. Okay, let's talk about rituals for people who have passed away. It's common to see monks involved in funerals, maybe chanting, is the idea that they can send the spirit to a better place. This siu, hu.
This is a really significant point, especially from the Theravāda perspective presented here. The text says there's actually no basis in the scriptures, no power a monk has, to directly transfer a consciousness or spirit to a better rebirth.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It outlines two possibilities. If consciousness lingers for a short while after death, hearing chanting might guide it towards wholesome thoughts. That's one thing.
Oh, okay.
Or, if the consciousness has already moved on, the living can perform meritorious deeds and dedicate that merit to the deceased, hoping it benefits them wherever they are. But crucially, neither of those is called siudo or siuthot, that sense of direct deliverance. The terms used are more like jia, jianim, jilak support, remembrance, strengthening.
So it's more like offering support or good energy rather than performing a spiritual transfer.
Exactly, and the core message remains self-reliance. The text quotes, "Be your own lamp, be your own island." Even after death, the emphasis is ultimately on the individual's own karma.
Wow, that's powerful. Okay. What about the idea that Buddhist teachings are somehow secret or mysterious?
The text refutes that. It points to the Buddha himself saying he taught with an open hand.
Meaning?
Meaning no secret doctrines, no hidden teachings kept back for only a chosen few. The core principles were made available openly for anyone willing to listen and practice.
That's quite different from some traditions, isn't it, where there are inner circles and hidden knowledge.
Yes, it emphasizes transparency.
Now, the next point discusses tamlin, often translated as spirituality. The source seems a bit critical.
Yeah, this is interesting. The critique is about how broadly the word tamlin is used today, especially in popular culture. It often lumps together lots of folk beliefs, New Age ideas, general feelings.
Kind of catch-all term.
Exactly. And the author points out there isn't really a direct, precise equivalent for that modern, broad concept of spirituality in the original Pali or Sanskrit texts of Buddhism.
So the concern is?
The concern seems to be that this vague term, spirituality, might blur the lines, potentially misrepresenting or watering down the very specific concepts and practices found in core Buddhism. It questions if Tomlin really captures the depth.
Right. It's about precision in understanding the actual teachings versus general spiritual vibes. Okay, we touched on nirvana not being another world already, but the text brings it up again.
Yes, it really wants to hammer this home. Nirvana isn't some far-off realm you escape to.
Right.
It's the cessation of suffering, the liberation, realized within this very life, this very experience. Again, that Hunan, quote, reinforces it. Awakening happens in the world, not apart from it.
Okay, message received. Not an escape plan. So, next misconception. Is Buddhist practice just about getting away from suffering to find pleasure instead?
The text says it's more nuanced than that. In Buddhist thought, both suffering and conventional pleasure are seen as potentially problematic.
How so? Pleasure seems pretty good.
Well, because ordinary pleasure is impermanent, right? It fades. And craving for it, clinging to it, or being upset when it ends, that itself becomes a source of suffering, a affliction.
Ah, okay. The attachment to pleasure is the issue.
Exactly. So the goal isn't just swapping pain for pleasure. It's about understanding the nature of both, seeing their impermanence, and developing a kind of inner balance, equanimity, that isn't dependent on those fleeting states, moving beyond that whole cycle.
Going beyond the roller coaster of pleasant and unpleasant. Got it. Okay, next. The idea that you practice Buddhism to obtain something, like enlightenment or merit.
This is a subtle but really crucial point. The author argues that the very mindset of trying to obtain or get something through practice can actually reinforce the ego.
The sense of, I am getting something.
Precisely. I want enlightenment, I am accumulating merit. This strengthens the sense of a solid, separate self, the Bungan. But a core Buddhist teaching is anatta, or Vongan non-self.
The idea that there isn't a permanent, fixed self.
Right. The text even references the Heart Sutra, which emphasizes emptiness. So, striving to gain something for this self runs counter to realizing the absence of such a self.
Wow, okay. So the motivation, the intention behind the practice is critical. It shouldn't be about acquisition for the ego.
That seems to be the point, yes.
What about the idea that practice is about correcting yourself, fixing your flaws?
This was a bit of a mind-bender. The source suggests that both trying to correct yourself and deciding not to correct yourself are actually incorrect views.
Huh, how does that work?
The emphasis shifts. It argues the most vital thing isn't fixing or not fixing, but seeing. Kaite, the insight, the direct seeing into the true nature of things.
The wisdom aspect again.
Yes, that deep seeing, that understanding is what naturally leads to change, to liberation. Without that core insight, the text implies you could be meditating or doing rituals for ages. And maybe you'll get some worldly benefits, some good feelings, but not the ultimate freedom from suffering. Seeing reality clearly is the key.
So insight is the engine of transformation, not just willpower or trying to fix things on the surface. Okay, the next one involves via. What is that exactly? Spiritual essence.
Yeah, that's the way to put it. The text identifies via and related concepts like hon, soul, and fash, animating spirit, as folk beliefs.
Not Buddhist doctrine.
Correct. Not
Yeah.
part of foundational Buddhism, according to this source. It gives the cultural example of Namtat, Nuk, 7 spirits for men, 9 for women, and says these ideas are tied to, like, the body's openings, more physical things.
Interesting.
And the text critiques applying these concepts to Buddhas or bodhisattvas, or the ritual of Tun Tup Tung, a spirit entering a statue. It views these as outside the scope of Buddhist teachings.
So again, distinguishing core principles from cultural overlays that might have gotten mixed in over time.
Seems to be the goal there.
All right, the last few points are about clarifying key terms, bodhisattva and Buddha. Let's start with bodhisattva. What's the clarification here?
The text brings it back to the original Pali term, bodhisattva, meaning Chungsanko Tritu Trikyu, basically, a sentient being possessing wisdom or aspiring to awakening.
Okay, not necessarily a celestial being.
Not primarily in this basic definition. The text then outlines 3 types based on their aspiration. There's the Shravaka,
That's here.
right, aiming for their own liberation by following the teachings. Then the Pratyeka Buddha, who becomes enlightened on their own but doesn't necessarily teach widely.
The solitary realizer.
And then the Samyaksa Buddha, like Gautama Buddha, who achieves full enlightenment and teaches the path extensively to help all beings.
The fully enlightened Buddha.
Yes. The text implies these are the fundamental categories relating to the path to awakening. So bodhisattva isn't necessarily a separate class of being, but refers to beings on one of these paths.
That's definitely a more grounded take than some popular images. Okay, and what about the word Buddha itself?
Same approach back to the original meaning. Buddha means nuijakness, an awakened one.
An awakened person.
Yes. And again, it mentions types. The Sravaka Buddha, awakened through hearing the Dharma, the Prachika Buddha, self-awakened, and the Samyaksa Buddha, fully and perfectly awakened, having perfected the paramitas, the qualities like generosity, wisdom, etc.
So Buddha is more like a title signifying awakening.
Exactly. It signifies the state of enlightenment. It's not exclusively referring to one historical figure, although Gautama Buddha is the Samyaksa Buddha of our current era. It denotes the attainment itself.
Got it. A state, not just a name. Finally, the text tackles the idea of enlightenment being about merging with something, becoming one with the universe or God or nature.
The clarification here is that true practice, from this viewpoint, isn't about losing your identity to dissolve into some larger entity.
No cosmic merging.
Not in that sense.
Yeah.
Instead, it emphasizes cultivating complete mindfulness and awareness in every single moment. Hentapfap, embodying the Dharma, the way things are, in every action.
Being fully present.
Totally present. When you have that full awareness, that complete attention, negative states and afflictions just don't have the space to arise. It's about integrating wisdom and awareness into your experience, moment by moment, not losing yourself in something else.
That's a really practical moment-to-moment focus. Wow, okay, that was a lot to unpack.
If not.
It really seems like many common ideas about Buddhism, or at least the ones addressed here, diverge quite a bit from the perspective in this text.
Yeah, the emphasis is so clearly on things like, well, no creator God in the traditional sense, the absolute necessity of direct insight over just belief or intellect, and this constant theme of self-reliance, taking responsibility for your own path.
Absolutely. And what stands out to me, thinking back, is maybe the critique of that general term spirituality, Tumlin. It really pushes for precision, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Questioning if these broad, modern terms actually capture what the original teachings were pointing towards.
It does. It highlights that potential gap between ancient wisdom and contemporary interpretations, which can sometimes become, a bit diluted or generalized.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how ideas travel and change.
For sure. And for you, our listener, really digging into these distinctions, it could offer a much richer way to engage with these ideas, right? Moving beyond maybe surface impressions.
It absolutely could. It invites a more nuanced look.
Which leads to a good question to maybe leave you with.
Yeah.
Given all these clarifications from the text that focus on non-self, insight, karma, not fate, nirvana being here, what does it genuinely mean to practice or engage with these principles today, especially when popular culture might present them differently?
That's a great question. How do these core ideas change how you might see Buddhist statues or meditation apps or even just the word karma being thrown around?
Right. How does understanding the roots reshape your view of the branches you encounter?
Something to definitely chew on. We really hope this deep dive into these misunderstandings has sparked some thought. And as always, we love getting your sources. Keep sending them our way. There's always more to explore.